I want you to imagine something for a second. Just put yourself in this headspace. Imagine waking up tomorrow, you know, pouring your coffee, looking out the window and realizing your entire world is just completely gone.
Right, like overnight.
Exactly. You have lost everything, and I mean everything all at once. Your nation's capital has been completely overrun by a foreign military.
And the smoke is literally still clearing?
Yeah, the smoke is still clearing.
Yeah.
Your government, like the entire executive branch, the judges, the lawmakers, they have all been dismantled. They've been arrested and forcibly marched thousands of miles away.
Which is just a staggering level of upheaval.
It really is.
It is.
And on top of all that, your absolute highest center of worship is gone. The physical anchor of your deepest, most foundational beliefs about how the universe operates has been reduced to a pile of smoldering rubble.
Which, I mean, that's something I think is really hard for us to fully grasp today.
Oh, for sure. It's not just a stinging military defeat. It is a total catastrophic erasure of your society's reality. The question is, how do you even begin to piece together an identity from the ashes of a world that no longer exists?
It is an almost incomprehensible level of trauma. You are not just asking how you survive physically, how you find food or shelter in a war zone.
Right, the basic survival stuff.
Yeah, you're asking how you survive psychologically and spiritually. How do you survive when the very structures that gave your life meaning, the institutions that defined your place in the cosmos, have been violently dismantled?
Okay, well, let's unpack this. Because that scenario isn't just some hypothetical thought experiment. It is the exact brutal reality that birthed the text we're exploring today.
Absolutely. It's the grounding reality of the whole thing.
So today we are doing a deep dive into a comprehensive survey of the Book of Ezekiel by Chris R. Velazquez. And our mission is to really tear into one of those visionary, theologically dense, and frankly structurally deliberate texts in human history.
And it really is a masterpiece of structure.
It is. We're going to see how this ancient book serves as a literal survival guide for catastrophic loss. It's a journey that drags you through absolute devastating judgment and then pivots into some of the most mind-bending visions of restoration ever put down on paper.
Which makes it, so much more than just a dusty ancient religious text. Ezekiel is this vital bridge across a massive historical chasm.
A bridge between what and what, exactly?
Well, it spans the gap between the total humiliating collapse of the kingdom of Judah and the post-exilic hope of a completely reinvented identity. It operates as a profound case study in how human beings navigate the collapse of their most trusted institutions.
And before we can even begin to wade into the famous, genuinely weird visions, and believe me, we are going to get to the Valley of Dry Bones standing up like an army, and those terrifying multi-eyed wheels in the sky.
Oh yeah, we can't skip the wheels.
Definitely not. But before that, we have to understand the dirt under their fingernails. We need the dates, the geopolitics, and the very real historical trauma that acted as a pressure cooker for this book.
That historical grounding isn't just background noise either. It's really the engine of the entire text. Ezekiel does not happen in some timeless spiritual vacuum.
Right, it's anchored in reality.
Exactly. The text is anchored in a very specific, very grim, and highly documented timeline.
So let's set the imperial stage for everyone. We are looking at the final suffocating decades of Judah's monarchy. The year is 605 BCE.
And we have the aggressive rise of the Babylonian Empire.
Right. A leader named Nabopolassar had started this expansion, but it's his successor, Nebuchadnezzar II, who really turns Babylon into an unstoppable juggernaut.
He's the one who really ramps things up.
He is. And this completely shifts the balance of power in the ancient Near East and puts the tiny kingdom of Judah directly in the crosshairs.
Nebuchadnezzar is methodically absorbing neighboring territories, and by 597 BCE, his forces capture Jerusalem for the first time.
Which is a huge date for our source material.
It is. Now, during this initial 597 capture, he actually restrains himself. He doesn't burn the city to the ground.
Wait, he restrains himself? Why?
Well, instead of total destruction, he executes a highly calculated, devastatingly effective political strategy. He essentially decapitates the society by deporting its elites.
Oh, wow. So he engineers a massive forced brain drain.
Exactly, a total brain drain.
He rounds up King Jehoiachin, the royal court, the military commanders, the master craftsmen, and, crucially, a young priest named Ezekiel.
Right. He takes anyone who could mount a resistance or run a functional state.
I constantly try to map this onto a modern reality. I mentioned a hostile foreign superpower invading today, and they don't just take the territory.
They take the people who make the territory work.
Yes. They kidnap the president, The entire cabinet, the top professors from Harvard and MIT, the leading tech innovators, the highest-ranking generals, and most prominent religious leaders.
Just packs them all up.
Yeah, they pack them up and forcibly relocate them to a refugee settlement in a hostile capital. And to ensure compliance back home, Nebuchadnezzar installs a puppet government, placing King Zedekiah on the throne in Jerusalem.
And Zedekiah is, he's basically the absolute worst person you could possibly have navigating an existential crisis.
Really? What makes him so bad at his job?
His reign is defined by this erratic political double-mindedness. He makes oaths and breaks them. He exhibits this desperate, shifting dependence on whatever fragile human alliances he can scramble together.
Always looking for a shortcut.
Exactly. He's constantly looking for a political loophole out of Babylonian domination, which only antagonizes Nebuchadnezzar further.
But what blows my mind about this specific era is that we don't just have to take the biblical text's word for it. We aren't just reading ancient theology, we are reading documented history.
Yes, the external validation is incredible.
Our source text highlights some incredible archaeological artifacts that prove this specific catastrophe happened exactly as described.
This is where the archaeology provides a chilling corroboration. We have physical, hard evidence. Let's start with the Babylonian Chronicle.
Okay, let's look at that.
Specifically, we are looking at a clay tablet designated as BM2126, which is currently housed in the British Museum.
So what exactly is written on that clay tablet? Because it's not a religious text, right?
Not at all. It is a Neo-Babylonian administrative text. It is basically the official state military record.
Like a Pentagon briefing or something.
Pretty much.
Right.
And this specific tablet explicitly, matter-of-factly records Nebuchadnezzar's campaign against Jerusalem in 597 BCE.
Oh, wow. Just dry military facts.
Yes. It details the siege of the city, the capture of the king, the appointment of a king of his own choosing, which would be Zedekiah, and the taking of heavy tribute back to Babylon.
That is wild.
It independently verifies the exact military operation that resulted in Ezekiel's deportation. It proves that the historical framing of the very first verses of the Book of Ezekiel is grounded in cold, imperial fact.
It makes it so visceral, you can almost feel the dust of the marching army. And it wasn't just the Babylonians keeping meticulous records of their conquests, right?
No, we have the other side of the story, too.
Right. We also have the perspective from the losing side, from the Judeans who are watching their world shrink. I am talking about the Lachish Ostraka.
Yes, the Lachish letters. These are Iron Age Hebrew inscriptions found at the archaeological site of Lachish.
And Lachish was pretty important, wasn't it?
It was. It was one of the last major Judean stronghold cities to fall before Jerusalem itself.
Now, for anyone listening who doesn't spend their weekends digging in trenches, what exactly is an ostrakon?
An ostrakon is simply a piece of broken pottery.
Just like a shard of a pot.
Exactly. In the ancient world, parchment and papyrus were expensive and often scarce, especially during a siege. So if you needed to write a quick message, you would grab a shard of a broken jar from the ground, dip your stylus in ink, and write on the clay.
Which paints such a desperate picture. These aren't formal documents written on beautiful scrolls.
No, they're born out of total necessity.
Right. These specific ostraka date to the agonizing final days of Judah's kingdom. You are essentially reading the frantic, real-time dispatches from military outposts.
They're writing on literal garbage because society is collapsing around them.
It's haunting. They describe watching the signal fires of neighboring cities go out one by one as the Babylonian army consumes the countryside.
It's the administrative and military collapse of a nation captured in ink on broken potsherds.
It is the raw data of a society that knows it is dying. And the textual corroboration extends all the way into the heart of the Babylonian exile itself, doesn't it?
It does. We have the Widener tablets.
Oh, the grocery lists. The Jehoiachin ration tablets.
Exactly. I love that you call them grocery lists. These are Babylonian administrative texts discovered in the subterranean archives of Babylon, which are now preserved in Berlin.
What do they say?
Well, these tablets actually name the deported Judean king Jehoiachin. They refer to him as Jeconiah. And they are literally ledgers detailing the specific rations of oil and grain he and his sons were receiving from the state.
Why does a ration list matter so much, though?
Because it proves that the conquered king was kept alive in exile, just as the biblical text claims.
Oh, I see. It validates the narrative.
Completely.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the sheer volume of the rations indicates he maintained a recognized, albeit captive, royal status. He wasn't just thrown into a dark hole and forgotten.
They were keeping him well-fed.
Yes, the Babylonians were keeping him as a high-value political pawn.
So we have the Babylonian military ledgers bragging about the conquest, the frantic scribblings on broken pottery from the Judean defenders watching their cities burn, and the literal pantry receipts proving the exiled king was sitting in Babylon.
The history is absolutely undeniable.
It really is. But history is just dates and movements. The psychological and spiritual reality of the people living through this history is a completely different monster.
And that psychological reality is one of absolute paradigm-shattering crisis.
Explain that. Why was it so earth-shattering for them?
To understand why, you really have to put yourself inside the theology of the ancient Near East. In that cultural mindset, wars were not merely border disputes fought between human armies.
Right. They had a cosmic dimension.
Exactly. They were cosmic conflicts fought between national gods.
So if the Babylonian army, flying the banner of their god Marduk, crushes the Judean army,
then the inescapable logical conclusion for the ancient mind is that Marduk is objectively stronger than YHWH.
wow, that is terrifying.
It is, or even more terrifying, they might conclude that YHWH has been entirely defeated, erased, or pricked into be a myth.
Because the physical evidence points to a theological defeat.
Yes. And when Babylon eventually returns in 587 or 586 BCE and actually burns the temple of YHWH to the ground, it is the ultimate theological checkmate.
It is a total collapse of their covenant identity. The Judean worldview was basically a three-legged stool. The promised land, the Davidic king, and the temple where God actually lived.
And Babylon just kicked all three legs out from under them.
Exactly. If the land is gone, the king is in chains, and the temple is a smoking crater, who are they? Does their God even exist anymore?
This profound identity crisis is the exact problem the text of Ezekiel was written to address. And it's worth noting here how seriously this text was taken by subsequent generations.
You mean how it was preserved over time?
Yes. The source material references the Dead Sea Scrolls, specifically manuscripts recovered from Qumran and Masada. The Israel Antiquities Authority Archive preserves this Judean Desert Scroll evidence.
And what do they have from Ezekiel?
There are 7 ancient manuscripts containing fragments of Ezekiel.
What do those desert scrolls tell us about the book itself?
They confirm that the Hebrew text of Ezekiel, what scholars call the Proto-Masoretic text, was transmitted with massive, astonishing stability over millennia.
Wait, when you say Proto-Masoretic, what does that actually mean? I want to make sure we aren't getting bogged down in academic jargon.
Fair point. Think of the Masoretic text as the universally accepted, authoritative Hebrew version of the Jewish Bible that was finalized in the Middle Ages.
Okay, that makes sense.
So Proto-Masoretic simply means the much older, ancient ancestor of that text. The scrolls found in the desert caves prove that the version of Ezekiel people were reading over 2,000 years ago is remarkably identical to the version we have today.
That is honestly mind-blowing.
It is. There are some shorter variations in certain ancient Greek translations, like the Septuagint, but the core architecture, the incredibly deliberate, symmetrical structure of the book, survived intact.
And that structural integrity is vital because Ezekiel builds his argument like an architect. So let's look at the situation on the ground.
Let's do it.
You have this deported priest, Ezekiel. The physical and cultural center of his world is gone. How does a priest function when he has no altar, no sacrifices, and no temple to work in?
He's basically unemployed in the most existential way possible.
Right. He is sitting hundreds of miles away from Jerusalem, enveloped in a cultural void.
Let's talk about that void. Sociologically, the exilic community in Babylon was a people stripped of everything. No king, no temple, no land. We are talking about a society strictly governed by honor-shame logic.
How does that honor-shame dynamic actually play out in their daily lives, especially in exile?
Well, in an honor-shame culture, your worth, your identity, and your social survival are entirely dependent on how the community perceives you.
So it's all about public perception.
Entirely. Military defeat wasn't just a loss of resources, it was the ultimate public disgrace. To be conquered, to be dragged away as captives, meant you were publicly humiliated by the gods.
So they weren't just sad, they were deeply, deeply ashamed.
Yes. The Israelites' idolatry hadn't just angered YHWH. It had brought an unbearable existential shame upon the entire people and disgraced their sanctuary. They were living in the ashes of their own humiliation.
So Ezekiel is sitting among these disgraced, traumatized, deeply confused deportees. The year is 593 or 592 BCE.
He's right in the thick of it.
He is. He is sitting by the muddy banks of the Kebar Canal in a refugee settlement called Tel Aviv in Babylon. And suddenly the sky rips open, and he experiences this inaugural vision.
And it is terrifying.
It really is. He sees a massive divine chariot throne. It's a storm wind coming out of the north, a flashing fire. There are these bizarre hybrid living creatures with 4 faces: human, lion, ox, and eagle.
It's just sensory overload.
Yeah, and there are these colossal wheels within wheels, rimmed with staring eyes, moving in every direction without turning. The sheer overwhelming nature of the description is staggering.
It is entirely designed to be overwhelming. It defies easy categorization because he is trying to describe the indescribable, and this is where we have to look at the theological vocabulary he uses.
Okay, lay some vocabulary on us.
The text introduces the Hebrew word kavod, which translates to glory. In Ezekiel's theology, the concept of kavod is the gravitational center of everything.
How did the average Judean understand kavod before this moment by the canal?
Up until Ezekiel saw this vision, the prevailing belief was that the kavod, the heavy, manifest, radiant presence of God, resided exclusively in the Holy of Holies.
Right, in the innermost room of the Jerusalem temple.
Exactly. It was geographically locked.
But Ezekiel is looking at this terrifying, flaming chariot throne, and he realizes he's looking at the kavod in Babylon.
Yes, and that single realization proves a radical, world-altering theological point. It completely shatters the ancient Near Eastern paradigm.
How so?
God's kavod is not geographically trapped in a box in Jerusalem. God is mobile. He is utterly transcendent. He is sovereign over the entire earth, and he is choosing to manifest his glory right there over the muddy, secular canals of an enemy empire.
Wow. So the exile isn't a sign that God lost.
Precisely. The exile is not a sign of divine absence or divine weakness. It is a demonstration of divine mobility.
I love that. Divine mobility.
Yeah, God isn't a local deity who got beat up by Marduk. God is riding a cosmic chariot wherever he pleases.
And out of this terrifying storm of glory, a voice speaks to Ezekiel. How does God address him?
He repeatedly calls him Ben Adam, which translates to Son of Man. It's used over 90 times in the book.
90 times. That has to be intentional.
Oh, it is highly intentional. It is used to emphasize Ezekiel's sheer mortal fragility, his dirt-bound creatureliness.
Just reminding him that he's basically dust.
Exactly. It highlights the infinite contrast between this frail human made of dust and the terrifying, blazing divine majesty of the kavod he is witnessing. And alongside this title of humility, Ezekiel is drafted into a very specific, heavy role. He is appointed as a shomer, a watchman.
A watchman. Like a guard on a city wall looking out for an invading army.
Right. He has a duty to blow the trumpet and warn the people of incoming danger.
If he warns them and they ignore him, their blood is on their own heads. But if he sees the danger and stays silent, their blood is on his hands. That is a terrifying level of accountability.
It's a massive burden for one person to carry.
But wait, I need to push back on the core logic here. If God can just show up on a flying, multi-eyed chariot in Babylon, why did the Jerusalem temple matter in the first place?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Like if God is everywhere and can ride into a refugee camp, who cares if the Babylonians knock down a building?
That is exactly the theological knot the exiles were trying to untangle. You have to remember the history of the covenant. The temple wasn't just a building.
It was more than that.
It was the physical anchor of the covenant relationship between YHWH and Israel. It was the promised place of intersection between heaven and earth. To realize that God could just leave it, that he was mobile and had actively departed from the sanctuary, meant accepting a devastating, terrifying truth.
That the covenant itself was broken.
Yes, the covenant had been fractured. And Ezekiel's job as a shomer, as the watchman, is to tell them the harsh, deeply uncomfortable truth about why God is suddenly mobile.
He has to deliver the bad news.
And the news is that God didn't leave because he was chased out by the Babylonian army. God left because of the people's own covenant infidelity.
But just standing on a soapbox and preaching that message wasn't going to cut through the thick psychological armor of the exiles.
Not a chance. They were in deep denial.
They were desperately clinging to the hope that this was just a temporary political setback, a brief hiccup, and soon they would all go home.
Right. They thought it would all blow over.
So Ezekiel realizes words aren't enough. He has to turn to extreme, bizarre performance art to force them to look at the truth.
The sign acts, chapters 4 through 24 of the book, are dedicated to this incredible, often shocking, prophetic performance art.
Performance art is definitely a right term for it.
It is. Ezekiel doesn't just deliver a sermon about judgment, he embodies it. He performs the judgment in a way that makes it impossible to ignore.
These sign acts are wild. I mean, they sound like avant-garde theater.
They really do.
In chapter 4, he is commanded to get a clay brick, draw a map of Jerusalem on it, build a literal toy siege wall around it, and place an iron plate between him and the model. He has to act out the siege of his own city.
And that's just the beginning.
Yeah. He is forced to eat heavily rationed, defiled bread, cooked over dung, to symbolize the horrific starvation that is going to hit the people trapped inside Jerusalem.
The source details how he has to lie on his side for over a year, right?
Yes. 390 days on his left side, 40 days on his right side. He is physically bound, symbolizing the agonizing weight of their sin and the literal paralysis of the coming siege.
And then there's the hair sign act in chapter 5, which is deeply visceral.
Oh, right. Tell us about that one.
He has to take a sharp sword and use it like a barber's razor to shave his head and his beard.
Which sounds dangerous.
Very. Then he weighs the hair on scales. He burns a third of it in a fire, he strikes a third of it with the sword, and he scatters the final third to the wind.
Such specific fractions.
Yes, it's this terrifyingly precise mathematical symbol for how the population of Jerusalem will be decimated by famine, violence, and dispersion.
We really have to understand this as embodied theology.
Absolutely. In the honor shame culture we discussed earlier, Ezekiel's symbolic actions are intentionally designed to be transgressive.
They're meant to be offensive almost.
Exactly. They intensify the public shame to provoke a reaction, to break through the cognitive dissonance. He is forcing them to visually consume the reality of the horror they are bringing upon themselves.
And the absolute climax of all this grief, the moment that really just breaks your heart, comes in chapter 24.
It's one of the most tragic moments in the book.
Ezekiel's wife dies. The text refers to her beautifully and tragically as the delight of his eyes, and God commands him not to mourn.
Which is just, it's almost cruel.
He is forbidden to weep. He cannot take off his turban. He cannot bare his feet. He cannot eat the traditional bread of mourners.
It goes against every human instinct.
Her sudden, unmourned death is a crushing, tragic sign of Jerusalem's impending fall. The temple, which is the delight of the nation's eyes, is going to be destroyed.
And the reaction will mirror his.
Right. The shock of that destruction will be so profound, so paralyzing, that the exiles won't even be able to process the grief. They will be frozen, just like Ezekiel.
It is a devastating, almost unimaginable burden for the prophet. Ezekiel's life is entirely subsumed by his message. He has to carry, perform, and literally live out this agonizing judgment before he is ever allowed to offer a single syllable of hope.
I want to drill down into the theological core of why this judgment is happening. You mentioned earlier that God wasn't defeated, but that he left.
Yes, the departure of the glory.
The mechanics of how and why he leaves are detailed in chapters 8 through 11, right?
Yes, and this is crucial for understanding the entire theology of the book. In these chapters, Ezekiel is taken in a vision back to Jerusalem, right into the inner courtyards of the sanctuary itself.
And what does he see there?
He is shown to Ava, which translates to abominations.
What kind of abominations? What was actually happening?
He sees rampant systemic cultic and moral desecration. He sees the elders of Israel secretly burning incense to idols in dark rooms.
Right, in the temple.
Yes. He sees women weeping for the Babylonian vegetation god Tammuz. He sees men turning their backs on the temple of YHWH to worship the sun.
Unbelievable.
This rampant idolatry is happening right inside the most sacred, supposedly pure spaces of the temple.
So they have fundamentally polluted the space where God is supposed to dwell.
Precisely. And because of this accumulated to Eva, the kavod, the glory of God, departs.
But it isn't a sudden vanishing act, is it?
No, not at all. Ezekiel describes a slow, step-by-step, judicial withdrawal.
I always picture it like a city's power grid being intentionally shut down sector by sector to prevent a catastrophic overload.
That is an excellent analogy. The glory moves from the cherubim over the ark in the Holy of Holies to the threshold of the temple.
Taking its time.
Then it moves to the eastern gate of the complex, and finally, it ascends from the city entirely, moving east toward the Mount of Olives and out toward Babylon.
Leaving them completely exposed.
The theological point Ezekiel is making is massive. YHWH's absolute holiness cannot coexist with unrepentant defilement. Therefore, God judges his own house first.
So Babylon isn't defeating God.
Exactly. The impending destruction by Babylon is not a failure of God to protect his house. It is a divine judicial withdrawal of glory that leaves the defiled sanctuary entirely unprotected.
The power grid is shut off. The defenses are down. And what fascinates me is how the people respond to this trauma. Because, honestly, human nature hasn't changed in 2,500 years.
Not one bit.
In chapter 18, we see exactly how the exiles are trying to process this nightmare. They start circulating a popular proverb. The parents have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge.
It is a proverb of deterministic fatalism.
Okay, unpack deterministic fatalism for me. What does that mean in this context?
They are essentially saying, the game is rigged, we are suffering entirely because of the sins our ancestors committed decades ago.
Blaming the previous generation.
Exactly. They view this generational trauma as an inescapable machine, and they are just cogs in it. Therefore, they bear no personal moral responsibility for this exile.
Which is such a deeply modern instinct. Think about how often today we use systemic blame to avoid looking in the mirror.
It's so much easier to blame the system.
It is. We point to history, to our parents, to macroeconomic factors, to our environment, and say, I'm just a product of a broken system. You can't blame me for my actions.
We desperately want to be victims because victims don't have to repent.
Wow, yes. But Ezekiel aggressively, almost violently, refutes this.
He absolutely tears that logic apart. This is where Ezekiel introduces a radical shift in how they view human nature and salvation. He acknowledges that the historical circumstances are terrible.
He doesn't deny the trauma.
No, but he completely rejects their fatalism. He tells them, as surely as I live, declares the sovereign Lord, you will no longer quote this proverb.
He shuts it down.
He insists that individual accountability is paramount. Every single person stands before God for their own actions. The righteous person will live, the wicked person will die.
He is giving them their agency back.
Exactly, and that is the hidden grace in this harsh message. If you are not just a helpless, doomed victim of your ancestors' sins, then you actually have the power to change course.
Because you're in the driver's seat.
Because individual guilt is real. Meaningful repentance is actually possible. You have the agency to turn back to God.
He refuses to allow the exiles the warm, numb comfort of playing the victim. He forces them to take responsibility.
And the timing of this message is critical.
Right, because right as this heavy message of personal accountability lands, the timeline catches up with the prophecy. By chapter 24, the calendar hits 586 BCE.
The hammer finally falls.
The news finally arrives in Babylon. Jerusalem has fallen. The walls are breached. The temple is burned to the ground. Everything Ezekiel had predicted and acted out has come to pass in horrifying detail.
It's a devastating validation of his ministry.
But what is structurally brilliant about this book is that Ezekiel doesn't just stop at judging his own people. Once Jerusalem falls, the camera rapidly zooms way out.
We hit a major, deliberate structural pivot in the text. From chapter 1 all the way to 24, the focus is entirely internal, the judgment of Judah and Jerusalem.
But then it shifts.
Yes. In chapters 25 through 32, Ezekiel turns his prophetic gaze to the international stage. He begins delivering blistering oracles of judgment against all the surrounding nations.
The source lists them methodically. Ammon, Moab, Edom, Philistia, Tyre, Sidon, and the great ancient superpower of Egypt. Why shift the focus to them?
This section is vital for understanding the scope of Ezekiel's theology. By judging these foreign nations for their hostile arrogance, for mocking Judah, and for their geopolitical opportunism in the wake of Jerusalem's fall, Ezekiel is proving a massive point.
Which is?
YHWH is not merely a local tribal deity who lost a border war and is now pouting in the corner. He is the sovereign, undisputed Lord of all international history.
So when the Babylonian war machine rolls over these other nations, it's not just secular imperial expansion.
In Ezekiel's theological framework, Nebuchadnezzar is merely an imperial instrument. He is a tool in YHWH's hand, functioning as an agent of divine judgment.
So Babylon isn't the real superpower.
Right, he is not a rival divine power. These oracles place the fall of Judah inside a much larger global framework. Every nation, no matter how ancient, wealthy, or heavily armed, stands under YHWH's jurisdiction.
The poetry and imagery he uses to describe the fall of these empires are incredible. He spends 3 entire chapters just on Tyre.
And Tyre was incredibly powerful.
Tyre was this massive, unbelievably wealthy maritime trading hub. It was a commercial center of the ancient world, and Ezekiel writes this elaborate mocking dirge over Tyre.
The shipwreck metaphor, right?
Yes, describing the city as a magnificent, over-decorated ship that sails into deep waters and is completely shattered by an east wind. He talks about its vast trade networks, its luxury goods, its sheer arrogance, and then prophesies its total sinking collapse.
It's brilliant poetry.
And he does the same thing with Egypt, comparing Pharaoh to a great sea monster that God is just going to haul out of the water with hooks and leave to rot in the desert.
Such vivid, grotesque imagery.
He also points back to Assyria in chapter 31. Assyria was the previous terrifying superpower that thought it would rule forever, and it fell. It's this constant warning about the illusion of imperial grandeur.
He is systematically dismantling the myth of imperial invincibility, whether it is the commercial economic wealth of Tyre or the sheer military might of Egypt. It is all fragile. It will all inevitably fall before the sovereignty of God.
But I have to ask about the psychology of the listener here. What does this all mean for the Judean exiles sitting in the dirt in a refugee camp?
It's a hard pill for them to swallow, I'm sure.
Is Ezekiel just giving them a heavy dose of schadenfreude? Like, hey guys, I know our city got burned down, but look on the bright side. God is going to smash the Edomites and the Egyptians too, so cheer up.
Not exactly.
Is there a deeper point to watching their enemies get judged, or is it just revenge fantasy?
That is a critical question. It is absolutely not about petty revenge or making the exiles feel better by watching others suffer. It is about the surgical removal of false hope.
The removal of false hope.
Think back to King Zedekiah, the puppet king we discussed earlier. What was his entire disastrous political strategy?
Double-minded alliances. He kept making treaties with Egypt, hoping the Egyptian chariots would ride to the rescue and save Jerusalem from Babylon.
Exactly. The exiles were politically addicted to human alliances. Even in exile, they were constantly looking over their shoulders, hoping Tyre's wealth or Egypt's army would somehow break Babylon's grip and save them.
They couldn't let it go.
They were putting their faith in geopolitics instead of the covenant.
So God is basically taking a red pen and crossing their potential saviors off the list one by one.
Yes. God is systematically dismantling every single human institution, every economic powerhouse, and every military alliance that the Israelites might be tempted to put their trust in.
Leaving them with nothing else to lean on.
He is showing them that salvation is not going to come from a clever political treaty with a superpower. All human empires are sinking ships. Until all those false hopes are completely burned away, the people will never truly exclusively rely on YHWH.
Wow. That is a terrifyingly thorough stripping away. The temple is gone, the holy cities are ruined, the neighboring nations are doomed, the geopolitical alliances are proven worthless.
Everything they relied on is gone.
The slate is wiped entirely, brutally clean. They have hit absolute, undeniable rock bottom. And it is only there, in the silence after the collapse, once all false human hopes are eradicated, that Ezekiel pivots.
And what a pivot it is.
He delivers one of the most stunning, comprehensive messages of hope in the ancient world.
This brings us into the third major movement of the book, chapters 33 through 39, the pivot to life and restoration.
Ezekiel is recommissioned. Before, he was a watchman looking out for doom. Now the doom has arrived, and he is appointed as a watchman of restoration.
His job description totally changes.
It does, and this new era starts with a blistering critique of the people who got them into this mess in the first place. The leadership.
In chapter 34, Ezekiel unleashes an indictment against the corrupt row, the shepherds of Israel.
And shepherd was a common metaphor, right?
Yes, in the ancient Near East, shepherd was a common metaphor for kings and leaders. Ezekiel condemns the political and religious elites who treated the people like livestock to be exploited.
Taking advantage of their own flock.
They fed themselves, clothed themselves with the wool, but they abandoned the weak and let the flock be scattered by wild animals.
God essentially says, you are all fired.
Exactly. God pronounces judgment on the corrupt shepherds and declares a radical intervention. He himself will shepherd the people.
Taking over the job directly.
He will search for the lost, bind up the injured, and feed them with justice. And this divine intervention points directly toward a promise of a future ideal human leader, a servant David, who will be a true faithful shepherd over a unified flock.
So the promise is better leadership. But Ezekiel is too smart to think that just swapping out the politician in charge fixes the underlying rot.
You can't just change the external variables.
Right. You can put a good king on the throne.
Right.
But if the people are still functionally selfish and idolatrous, the society will eventually collapse again. The external structure isn't the root problem.
The heart is the problem.
So in chapter 36, he introduces this incredible paradigm-shifting promise of inner renewal.
This is perhaps one of the most profound anticipations of spiritual transformation in the entire Old Testament. Ezekiel announces that God isn't just going to give them a new city, he's going to give them a levadash, a completely new heart.
A new heart.
And he will put a new ruah, a new spirit or breath within them. He says God will remove their heart of stone and give them a heart of flesh.
Because external institutional reform is ultimately powerless to change human nature. You can build a shiny new temple, you can draft new laws, but if the people are still spiritually dead, it's useless.
It's just window dressing.
They need an internal recreation.
Yeah.
They need the spirit to actually generate obedience from the inside out.
It is a profound, permanent shift from a religion based solely on external compliance to a code of laws, to a covenant based on internal transformation.
The motivation comes from within now.
The capacity to obey God will be a gift given by God himself. And this vital theme of the Ruah, the life-giving breath or spirit, flows directly into what is undoubtedly the most famous visceral chapter in the entire book.
Oh, we have arrived at chapter 37. We have. The Valley of Dry Bones. It is such a vivid, creepy, and ultimately triumphant picture. Ezekiel is taken by the Spirit and dropped into the middle of a valley filled with bones.
And not just bones.
Right. The text emphasizes that they are very dry. They are bleached, scattered, disorganized. It's the aftermath of a massacre. And God asks him this impossible question. Son of man, can these bones live?
It's a test, really.
And Ezekiel gives this brilliant non-committal answer. He basically says, Sovereign Lord, only you know.
He's not putting his foot in his mouth.
Smart man. Then God commands him to prophesy to the dry bones. And as he speaks the word, there's a rattling sound. The bones start sliding together.
It's like a horror movie in reverse.
It really is. Sinews and muscle wrap around them and skin covers them. It's like watching a time-lapse video of decomposition in reverse. But there are still just lifeless corpses lying on the ground.
The bodies are there, but no life.
Then he is told to prophesy to the Ruah, the breath. The breath enters them, and they suddenly gasp, stand up, and become a vast, living army.
It is a sheer masterpiece of prophetic imagination. Now, to understand its power, we have to be very precise about what this meant to the people who first heard it.
Right. What was the immediate takeaway?
Primarily in its immediate historical context, this is a metaphor for national restoration. The text explicitly tells us that the dry bones represent the whole house of Israel.
Because they fell dead as a nation.
The exiles were sitting in Babylon saying, "Our bones are dried up and our hope is lost. We are cut off." God is responding directly to their despair, saying he has the power to resurrect the dead nation itself.
And this isn't just about the southern kingdom of Judah, right? It's about putting the whole fractured family back together.
Yes. This vision is immediately followed by another sign act, where Ezekiel takes 2 sticks, writes the names of Judah and Joseph on them, and holds them together in his hand so they become one stick.
2 nations becoming one again.
It signifies that the deeply fractured, historically divided kingdom will be completely reunified under one covenant and one shepherd.
But wait, I have to stop you there. A valley of skeletons growing flesh and standing up as a zombie army. How did an ancient audience actually process that?
That's a great point to raise.
Did they just see it as a clever political metaphor for their country coming back? Or did it plant a different seed? It doesn't just stop at national metaphor, does it?
It doesn't. While the immediate historical referent is absolutely the political and spiritual restoration of the exiled community, you cannot introduce an image this powerful without it echoing into the future.
It's too potent to stay just a metaphor.
Exactly. This vision introduces a profound eschatological horizon, meaning it points toward the ultimate final destiny of humanity.
Oh, wow.
It becomes a foundational, classic biblical image that later generations used to build the theological hope of actual physical bodily resurrection. It takes the promise of survival and elevates it into the realm of ultimate victory over death itself.
Speaking of ultimate victory, that brings us right to the doorstep of chapters 38 and 39. The mysterious Gog of Magog.
Yes, the infamous Gog.
Now, this is a section that sparks endless, feverish modern speculation. People love trying to take Gog of Magog and map it onto modern-day countries or specific modern politicians or contemporary global conflicts in the Middle East.
No, there are entire industries built on this.
They treat it like a geopolitical decoder ring. Is that actually what Ezekiel was doing? Was he drawing a treasure map for 21st century cable news?
This is an area where we have to tread very carefully and rely heavily on the scholarly consensus provided in our source material.
Okay, what does the consensus say?
The text clearly depicts a massive, final cosmic assault by hostile forces against God's newly restored, peaceful people. This dark coalition is led by a figure named Gog from the land of Magog.
Sounds like a final boss battle.
It really does, and it ends with an absolute, overwhelming divine victory where God himself destroys the invading armies to vindicate his holy name. However, trying to pin a precise historical or modern geographical reference to Gog and Magog misses the entire point of the genre.
So what is the actual point if it isn't predicting modern nation-states?
The core message is not a map of modern political borders. It is a theological guarantee of ultimate security. Think about the psychology of the exiles.
They're traumatized.
God has just promised them that they will be resurrected, given new hearts, and brought back to their land. But they know history. They know that eventually another Babylon will always rise.
They are terrified that their restoration will just end in another tragic exile down the road.
They need to know the ending is permanent.
Exactly. The vision of Gog and Magog is God's assurance that after they are restored, they will face one final, ultimate aggregation of human evil and hostility, but God will definitively, permanently crush it.
So it's about peace of mind.
The point of the vision is finality. It assures the exiles that God will protect them forever. To reduce these chapters to a modern political decoding game is to rob the text of the profound cosmic comfort it was meant to provide.
That's a really good way to frame it.
Okay, so the picture is complete. The people are metaphorically resurrected. They are unified under one shepherd. They have new hearts of flesh. The Spirit is breathing within them, and their ultimate cosmic enemies are permanently defeated.
It's the perfect happily ever after.
But there is a practical problem. Where does a restored people actually live? A society needs a center. It needs space to operate. It needs a place to interact with this holy God.
They need a new home base.
Which brings us to the massive, intricate, final vision of the book, chapters 40 through 48.
The ultimate blueprint. This section is the grand culmination of Ezekiel's entire theology of holy presence.
Ezekiel's taken in a vision back to the land of Israel, set on a very high mountain, and he is given this meticulous, almost obsessively detailed vision of a new temple complex.
It's highly, highly detailed.
He is walking around with an angelic guide who has a measuring rod, and they are measuring literally everything. Wall thicknesses, gate dimensions, outer courts, inner courts, priestly chambers, wooden altars.
It reads exactly like an architectural schematic.
It lays out strict holy divisions to separate the sacred from the profane. It even institutes a specific group, the Zadokite priestly order, to oversee the worship.
And we should pause to clarify why he specifies the Zadokite priestly order.
Right, who is Zadok?
Zadok was a high priest who remained fiercely loyal to the line of King David during a time of intense rebellion early in Israel's history.
So he represents ultimate loyalty.
By explicitly restricting the altar service to the sons of Zadok in this new temple, Ezekiel is essentially signaling a return to the purest, most uncompromising foundational roots of their faith. He is symbolically stripping away centuries of subsequent corruption and compromise.
So the measurements and the rules were all about establishing uncompromised holiness. And right in the middle of all this measuring, in chapter 43, we get what might be the most beautiful, satisfying moment of narrative symmetry in the entire book.
The return of the glory.
Yes. Back in chapter 10, Ezekiel watched in horror as the Kavod, the glory of YHWH, tragically powered down and abandoned the corrupt, idolatrous temple, moving away to the east,
Leaving them in darkness.
Now, in chapter 43, he looks to the east again, and he sees that same blazing glory returning. It enters through the eastern gate and fills this new, purified sanctuary. The presence of God has officially come back to dwell with his people.
And what is crucial here is that the presence isn't just a static glow sitting in a room. It is active and life-giving.
Which leads right into chapter 47, the river of life. This is honestly my favorite imagery in the book.
It's breathtaking.
Out of this new temple, from right under the threshold, the trickle of water begins to flow. And as it flows east, it defies the laws of physics. The angelic guide measures the water. First it's ankle deep, further out it's knee deep, then waist deep.
Getting deeper and deeper out of nowhere.
Finally it becomes a massive uncrossable river, and everywhere this water flows, it brings explosive, miraculous life. It flows down into the Araba, into the Dead Sea.
And we have to remember the ecological reality of the Dead Sea. It is a hypersaline lake. Nothing lives in it. It is literally dead water.
Exactly. But when this river from the temple hits the Dead Sea, the salty waters become entirely fresh. Swarms of living creatures thrive in it. Fishermen are standing on the shores casting nets.
From death to abundant life.
The banks of the river are lined with miraculous fruit trees that produce fresh fruit every single month, and their leaves never wither because they're used for healing. It is this breathtaking picture of God's holy presence flowing out of the sanctuary to heal and restore the entire broken cosmos.
It is a staggering vision of new creation echoing all the way back to the Garden of Eden. But this entire section, from the meticulous temple measurements to the river, presents a major interpretive debate for scholars.
Really, what's the debate?
The question is, was this meant to be a literal, physical blueprint? Should the returning exiles have taken chapters 40 through 48, hired a contractor, and used them as literal construction plans to build a physical building with these exact cubit measurements?
Right, because alongside the poetic river, there are strict instructions for cultic animal sacrifices and very specific tribal land allotments. It feels like a mix of poetry and municipal zoning laws.
The academic consensus, and referencing the Cambridge University Press analysis highlighted in our source material, argues that this is best read as a visionary, theologically loaded blueprint of restored holiness, not as literal architectural trivia.
So it's a theology lesson disguised as a floor plan.
Exactly. The cultic sacrifices and the architectural divisions mentioned here function within Ezekiel's specific symbolic priestly worldview. He's a priest. He speaks in the language of priesthood.
That makes perfect sense.
The sacrifices do not imply a rejection of future spiritual grace, but rather they symbolize the perfect, meticulously ordered worship of a completely sanctified community. The profound emphasis of these chapters is on the reality and purity of the divine presence, not the literal masonry of the walls.
And the grand finale of the book, the very last sentence, absolutely proves that point. It is entirely about the presence. The very last verse of chapter 48 describes the new city, and it gives it a new name.
The city is no longer called Jerusalem. It is given a near definitive name, Yahweh Shammah, which translates to the Lord is there.
The Lord is there.
Yeah.
It's so simple but so powerful.
Yes. This is built entirely on the ancient Shekan or Mishkan concept, the fundamental biblical idea of God intimately dwelling or tabernacling with his people.
That's the finish line.
That is the ultimate goal of the entire book, YHWH dwelling permanently among a purified people in a renewed land.
And this visionary blueprint, this profound theology of God's dwelling presence, it didn't just stay confined to the end of the Old Testament. It sent absolute shockwaves through history.
It certainly did.
It deeply shaped the entire canonical trajectory of the Bible, leading right into the New Testament.
Absolutely. When you look at it canonically, Ezekiel is one of the clearest, most robust bridges from the Mosaic covenant of the Old Testament into the New Covenant. The Christological implications, how it points forward to Jesus, are massive.
What are some of those connections?
Our source outlines several major ways Ezekiel sets the stage for the New Testament.
Let's talk through those connections, because they are everywhere once you know what to look for. Start with the title God uses for Ezekiel.
The prophetic title, Ben Adam, Son of Man. Throughout Ezekiel, this term is used to highlight the prophet's sheer, frail humanity in the face of divine glory.
But centuries later,
this exact term becomes the primary, favored self-designation used by Jesus in the Gospels. He adopts the title of the humble, mortal watchman who embodies the suffering of the people.
and what about the promise of the leader, the new shepherd?
The devastating critique of the corrupt shepherds in chapter 34, followed by the promise that God will send a Davidic shepherd who will truly feed and protect the flock, finds its ultimate culmination in the Gospel of John.
When Jesus says, I am the good shepherd.
Exactly. Jesus stands up and explicitly declares, I am the good shepherd, the one who lays down his life for the sheep, directly fulfilling Ezekiel's promise of divine leadership.
And then there is the core theme of the book, the temple presence. Ezekiel's entire crisis is about God leaving the temple and eventually returning to dwell with his people.
In the New Testament, this concept of the returning presence is fulfilled not in a building of stone, but in the incarnation of Christ. The Gospel of John says, the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us.
He is the mobile temple.
Jesus literally becomes the localized, mobile presence of God's glory on earth. And Jesus later refers to his own resurrected body as the true temple that cannot be destroyed.
Which brings us to the internal transformation. Ezekiel promised a new heart of flesh and a new spirit.
That promise in chapter 36 directly anticipates the fundamental mechanics of the new covenant. It is realized through the outpouring of the Holy Spirit.
Taking the law off the tablets and putting it in people.
Exactly. The Spirit takes the law that was written on stone tablets and writes it internally on the human heart, creating that genuine, inside-out obedience Ezekiel knew was the only way forward.
And finally, the grand finale imagery. The river of life and the city where God dwells.
This imagery is lifted almost verbatim by the Book of Revelation. In chapters 21 and 22, the vision of the New Jerusalem features the river of the water of life flowing bright as crystal from the throne of God.
And the trees for healing.
Yes, with the tree of life yielding its fruit every month for the healing of the nations. And the ultimate promise of Revelation is that the dwelling place of God is now permanently with humanity. It is the ultimate realization of Yahweh Shammah.
Which is wild when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But here is where it gets really interesting for us listening to this today. Ezekiel isn't just a historical bridge to the New Testament. It is incredibly, almost uncomfortably relevant for our modern world.
It is timeless in its critique.
When we look at our contemporary society, Ezekiel operates as a masterclass in how to handle religious hypocrisy, systemic institutional corruption, and catastrophic leader failure.
It is intensely practical theology for any era. Ezekiel teaches a very harsh but absolutely necessary lesson. We must never confuse sacred forms with covenant faithfulness.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning that just because a society, a church, or a nation has the right buildings, the right historical traditions, or the right political rhetoric, does not mean it possesses the approving presence of God. Ezekiel is a devastating critique of what theologians call ecclesial triumphalism.
Ecclesial triumphalism. Break that down for me.
It is the arrogant, dangerous belief that a specific religious institution or specific nation is inherently perfect, untouchable, and guaranteed to succeed simply because it exists.
Believing you're invincible.
It is the assumption that God is essentially a mascot trapped in our building, forced to bless whatever we do. Ezekiel shatters that illusion. It is a critique of any system that tries to substitute political power, wealth, or institutional might for actual lived holiness.
Yes. You cannot legislate a new heart. Ezekiel shows us what it looks like to tell the hard, unpopular truth about societal sin without flinching.
He pulls no punches.
He refuses to offer a sentimental, superficial version of religion that just acts as a soothing balm, making people feel comfortable while they sit in their corruption. He demands absolute integrity.
He insists that true justice, care for the vulnerable, and a renewed community are the unavoidable, necessary consequences of being purified by God.
If we are not seeing justice, if we are not seeing integrity in our institutions, it is because we are trusting the outward, shiny forms while completely ignoring the internal rot.
It serves as a perpetual warning to any community that believes its history, its wealth, or its impressive institutions make it immune to divine judgment. God's holiness cannot be manipulated, bribed, or contained by our traditions.
So to bring all of this massive theology and history together, what a monumental journey. We started with a traumatized, deported priest sitting by a muddy canal in Babylon, watching the smoke rise from his civilization.
And we end with a river of life.
And through his visions, we learn that God's holiness is absolute and uncompromising. We learn that judgment and mercy are not opposite reactions. They are two sides of the exact same divine character, both working relentlessly to purify a people.
Which is such a hopeful way to view it.
Most importantly, we learn that exile, collapse, and loss are not the end of the promise. Even when our most trusted sacred structures collapse into dust, God is not defeated. God's glory is never trapped in broken human institutions.
God's future for his people is not secured by human military strength, by clever political alliances, or by magnificent buildings. It is secured entirely by his own faithfulness to his own name.
And that brings us right back to you, listening to this deep dive right now. We have unpacked the dirt of the archaeology, the bizarre avant-garde sign acts, the profound historical trauma, and the visionary blueprints of a new reality.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. But the core challenge of Ezekiel's message remains exactly as sharp and uncomfortable today as it was in 593 BCE. So I want to leave you with this one lingering question to chew on as you go about the rest of your day.
I love a good final question.
If Ezekiel teaches us that God's presence can, and absolutely will, walk out the front door of the structures we assume are the most sacred and secure, where in your own life, or in our society today, are you trusting the safety of the building rather than the truth of the presence?
That's a profound thought to end on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Book of Ezekiel.